The uncanny knowing. It had been a week since he'd last seen her in the hallway of their apartment building, and still he could think of nothing else. He hadn't even been able to pass her by without noticing the existence of something he identified only as a nameless fear.
She had just been walking there, but there was something off about her.
He couldn't explain it. All he knew was that something about her felt inhuman. It was then that he started to notice far more strange occurrences around him. Lights seemed to dim whenever she walked by, as if she were stealing their energy, and his computer ceased operating properly whenever she entered the room. It was almost as if she were some kind of energy vampire, using any source of life to increase her own. But what concerned him even more was the increasingly eerie feeling that she knew something he could never even begin to comprehend. It was like she had knowledge beyond what anything human could possess, and it made him feel extremely uncomfortable. He tried to ask his friends about it, but they all just laughed it off.
No one seemed to take his suspicions seriously beyond saying she seemed really strange.
He'd just have to stay cautious. One of the most troublesome aspects of this strange presence was that he had to keep it a secret. He wasn't even sure why. All he knew was that he was forbidden from ever mentioning it to anyone. He had no one to tell about the things he saw her do, the flickering of lights, the oddly muted sound of her voice, the way she seemed to just know things that no one person should be able to know. Whatever it was, he was certain she was tied to it. He was such a fool for thinking she seemed normal. This terrifying feeling of her being always one step ahead seemed to grow stronger each day. He was starting to feel like he was being watched, and he was always met with a feeling of dread whenever they crossed paths.
And then one day, he decided to confront her.
He finally built up the courage to go to her apartment and ask her what was going on. He was certain it would lead to some kind of explanation, some kind of understanding. But that's not what happened. When he knocked on her door and she stepped out, her face was pale and empty, possessing a look of fear that he'd never seen before. She told him of an ancient story of an apex predator, of how it had the power to suck the life force from those its eyes touched, how it had been stalking her for centuries now and was the source of the strangeness he had been sensing around her. Just when he thought it couldn't get any more bizarre, she lifted her eyes so that they were meeting his, and he knew then that he was doomed. He felt himself being pulled into something much darker, something he could never come back from. Suddenly, he was overwhelmed by a nauseating feeling of suffering, of being alive and yet already dead. He felt the life force leaving his body, being taken away by a force he couldn't comprehend. He felt himself dying inside, his mortal body going numb as he faced his own mortality. The last thing he saw before departing this world was her pale face and her empty eyes, silently watching him as he left this world and entered the realm of the uncanny knowing.